What's going on, guys? Junior's Fishing Company with another craft fur jig today. So I've got here an Ahrex Predator 374 in number 1. This is just a pretty standard 90-degree jig hook. I'm starting to like 90 degrees a lot. I've been using a lot of 60 degrees and stuff like that, but these 90 degrees I really like. The bead I've got on here, I just did a video a couple weeks ago. This is an 8mm slotted tungsten bead from Spawn Fly Fish. This is a fanthom tungsten bead, and this is how this is black nickel. This is really the only color I think they still have, at least when I'm filming this video. It's a great bead, and it's super heavy. I mean, this is with the hook, and this is just 0.02 lead-free wire. I really just put this on really to keep the bead in place, but not necessarily to add weight, but just to add a little bit more bulk to this body. Otherwise I would have had to end up doing a bunch of thread wraps. This will add just a little bit of body because this slot is so big that you kind of have to be a little bit careful of materials falling in there and stuff. So I've just added a little bit of lead-free wire there just to kind of keep stuff out as much as I can. Now the color pattern I'm going to do today, in my opinion, is probably the most classic color pattern there is. I mean, I still do quite a bit. I grew up just throwing Rapalas, deep runners, shallow runners, square bills, jointed, whatever. And the original Rapala is black with a little bit of silver on the bottom. People call them a bunch of different names, but it's really just that black and white pattern. And so what I'm going to do today, I've got 2 craft furs that I'm going to use. Just a standard black. This is just your regular black. I can't remember exactly what color this is. You can see it's not white. It's kind of like a silvery gray. There's almost a little bit of shine in this. So I don't know if it's just a straight up like a soft gray or something like that, but I can't remember. I think I got this from Charlie's Fly Box, but it's a really cool color. What I'm going to end up doing, just to add a little bit of flash to this bait, I don't know if you're going to end up being able to see this a ton. It's not really to add any body or anything like that. This is just larva lace in angel hair in silver holo, silver holographic. I'm going to add this a couple times in this bait, really at the end and right at the beginning. I want this bait to be about 3 inches just because this is such a heavy jig, and I'm going to put eyes on here, so I want quite a bit sticking off of this, a little bit more than half the length of the hook. I'm going to put this down just about, I don't really want to go the full length, so I'll kind of just trim this off, I don't know, maybe a 1/4 inch of that off. I've got 140 UTC in just red here. I'm using red because at the end, I mean, you're not going to be able to see this thread anyway, and so at the end though, when I put some UV on there with the eyes, you'll just have a little bit of red showing. And so really that's the only reason. I mean, you could easily do black or white or really any color, because again, you're not going to be able to see this a ton. So I'm going to build this really similar to how I built the last craft fur streamer. I've got another one that I'll show you at the end. I want this bait to be more black than silver, and so I'm going to do 3 stacks of craft fur here, and really I got to be careful because this is going to be the top of my bait, this is going to be the bottom. So what I'm going to do is the first one I put in, I'm going to kind of just split this craft fur in half, and this craft fur is really easy to split. It behaves really well. I'm just going to put that in there, and I want to make sure that I'm getting this long enough where I'm going to kind of hit that 3 inches, so I can just really measure out one of these, and I want to kind of go to where that little, I don't know, screw or whatever you'd call it, rivet or whatever it is, I'm going to pull out these longer ones. I'm just going to go to there. It always ends up being a little bit longer when it's wet. So if you are really, really picky about how long it's going to be, go a little bit shorter than what you normally would, and it will probably end up being pretty perfect. So I'm just going right behind that lead-free wire. I kind of landed right on it, but that's all right. I'll just wrap back a little bit. I don't really want that to rotate too much. Again, I could put a silver down here, and I could put one on the top too, but I'm not going to do that. I don't want this bait to be too thick, and the stacks of stuff that I put on the top by the bead are going to be a lot thicker. So I'm just going to cut this off. You could cut it tapered or do whatever you want, but again, this body, you're not really going to be able to see much anyway when that craft fur's down. So I'll just wrap this. I'm going to try and get that pushed down. Then I can come back up here, just work my way up on this lead-free wire. And I'm going to come all the way up. I don't really need to build the body again because I put that thicker wire down there. I'm going to come right by this bead. And I can just, I really can do whichever one I want first up here. I might as well just do black because it's sitting closer to me. So I'll just kind of measure this out. Again, I'll end up splitting it, but I want that to be about the same as my other black, just because this craft fur gets so thin when it gets wet that you do, in my opinion, I always do, I add a little bit more than what I think I'm going to do. I would rather have this bait end up being a little bit too thick, but I really don't think it's going to because I'm not putting that much down. I'll just split this again, and you can end up getting a comb because it's not going to be perfect, and when you get it wet you're going to be able to see which side ended up being a little bit off. So I'll just get that pushed right up by my bead, cord up my thread, and I'm not worried about adding a big collar here because I am going to cover this with eyes. I just want to kind of hold that and get some tension down while I get some wraps and just make sure that it doesn't get too far pushed over. I'm not worried if I just don't want it to rotate really, but I do want to kind of cover the sides so you can kind of see. I kind of want that to be right at the halfway point of my hook on the side, and then I can just really come in here and ream down really good and make sure that that stuff is down. And I can come in here in a minute and just trim off if it's really bugging me. I can get a little razor blade or something and kind of trim that off. So now I can just grab my gray, and I've got a pretty hearty chunk of this gray that I'm going to put down, but I'm going to try and keep it as long, if not a little bit shorter than that white, and I can really just kind of pull out these couple fibers that are just a little bit longer. I want that black to be maybe just a little bit longer or about the same. I mean, when they blend together, those tips are going to be so thin anyway, it might go one way or the other. Again, this is a lot of craft fur, so I'm going to kind of be careful when I put this down, but I have this huge slot here where most of this extra is going to sit anyway. So I'm just going to push it right up to my slot, and I'm just going to push that down with a couple really tight wraps, and then I can kind of see most of that is falling right into there. And again, I can come with a razor blade or something and really trim that out. Just get a couple more wraps just for security, make sure that everything's doing what I want it to do. And before I whip finish, I'm going to put down some flash, and then I just want to make sure that the thread collar I have here is going to be big enough for my eyes. I don't want too much going on, too much of my eye and that glue and all that stuff going onto this eye, and it looks really puffy now, but it won't when it gets wet. So I'll just come back up here, and I've got just two little bits of this angel hair, and what I'm going to do I'm not going to necessarily taper this. I mean, I could pull out just a little bit and taper it a little, but I really don't care about it being tapered. I'm going to go probably about halfway down just to add a little bit of flash. And this angel hair, when you pull it off of the hank or whatever you call it, it's usually wrapped around a zip tie. Some of them are really curly if they get pulled or whatever. So you want to make sure, you can see this one, just make sure you pull out those wonky ones because I don't want those in there. Again, I'm going to just go maybe halfway down, right on the side. I'll kind of push it to separate them a little bit because I don't want just one tiny little, these are so thin. So if you put these down and you don't spread them out a little bit, it's going to just be a razor thin, or you could just add more materials too. But I'll just get those tied down. Then I can just, you could fold this back too to add even more flash, but I don't need that much flash. And I can come to the other side and just do the exact same thing. I'm just going to make sure that these are going to be about the same size. I'll just get that pushed right there on the side, cord up my thread, and I'm going to just jump up here. I could have just wrapped, but I'll just jump up there and make sure that these are going to be, again, not perfect, but where I want them, right on the side. And then I'll come back up here and I'm going to cut the excess off. Those stacks were pretty much the same. I mean, you could almost, I've got a little scale here that I weigh a lot of stuff. I'll weigh hooks and beads and stuff like that, but sometimes if you get really picky, like if you're making a deer hair jig or something, you can weigh each stack to be the same. So if it's 1/3 of a gram or whatever it is, you could make each stack the exact same, so you know you're going to get the same size bait every time. But I got a little bit of flash there, I'm not worried about that. So what I'm going to do, I've got these 6mm eyes, and I'm just going to push this one up and make sure, so I'm not going to go too far into that craft fur, and it doesn't look like I'm gonna, so I'm gonna whip finish off, and then I'm gonna try and flatten out this thread, because you can see right there I just jumped back too. It wants to fall back. I don't know how many whip finishes that was, probably too many, but so then I'll get this trimmed, I'll cut this off, and we'll get these eyes on there. Alright, so the eyes I'm going to use, again, they're just 6mm. You could put some fire on there, but really, to match this little silver and that silver holographic, I'm just going to go with ice. To me, it's just, I mean, I go through more of these ice eyes than anything, just because I really don't think it matters a ton. I try not to think too much about what kind of eyes I'm putting on. I like how these living eyes look, and that's really all that matters. So I'm going to try and get that just centered, just enough, get it pushed right up to my bead, and then I can just do the other side, get both these eyes on there, and then I'm just going to do a little bit of UV, and then we'll get this bait wet, and we can see where we're going. So it's really, I mean, it's late February right now. I don't know when this video is going to come out, late February, and I'm starting to kind of think about spring. So drop a comment below if there's anything in spring, summer, I'm not thinking fall yet, but spring and summer baits that you'd want to see, like deer hair stuff. I think I'm going to do a couple musky stuff right away, just some marabou skirts and stuff like that. I might do an inline or two, but I'm really starting to kind of think spring. I mean, you've got about 2 months until we're fishing. So, all right, with this UV, I'm gonna go with thin. I used thin the last couple videos, just because I think I said it a few times, but it just sinks right into those eyes. I'm gonna try and avoid, and I've got a nice thread bump here, So I'm really not gonna build up too much of a resin collar, and what I want to do is I'm gonna let that settle, and I'm just gonna zap it really quick, just because I don't want it to run. This is the thin, so I don't want it to run into my craft fur too much, because if it does, then it's just gonna push that up and it's not gonna want to fall down when it's wet. So I really want to be careful, and then I have to be careful here because you could lose about ½ an ounce of this stuff in this slot. These beads are so awesome, and actually they just came out with 9mm and 10mm. I don't know how much those are going to weigh. This 8mm is almost spot on with 1/8 of an ounce, and so now I got to order a bunch of new jig hooks, but it's going to make it's going to be a lot of fun making some of these spring and summer baits, because it's not just going to be a standard lead head jig. There's a bunch of different hooks and stuff that I'm thinking about using with these beads. So I'm going to get this wet, and then we can really see how long. I got to put some more water in here. It evaporates out. So I'll just get that a little bit wet. Let that drip just a couple times, just because this stuff just sucks up water, and it does add some weight too. And I might have to trim off that tail just a little bit, because I do have a little piece that's sticking out. So you can kind of see, and I can just kind of sculpt this body a little bit. If you let it harden, if you sculpt it and then let it harden, it'll kind of look kind of how you want it. So there you have it. In my opinion, probably the most classic colors in fishing. Just the top black, a little bit of silver or white on the bottom, a little bit of flash, just that little hint of red. I mean, this is as classic of a bait as you can think of. I know I probably can't use Rapala in the title of this video. I don't want to get an email saying you're not allowed to do that, but it just reminds me of being a kid again, throwing on a shallow running Rapala and just fishing all day in the John boat with my brother. So a little 3-inch heavy 1/8 ounce. You can use this in the winter, you can use this in the spring, summer, fall. You can use this anytime. You'll easily be able to cast this with a 6.5 foot spinning rod with 10-pound braid on it. Again, starting to think spring a little bit. I might have a couple more winter videos on the hopper, but I'm really going to start in the next couple weeks, for sure by mid-March. I mean, that 2-month mark before bass opener, I really start to spin the wheels with spring stuff. So a couple more of these. Hang in there if you don't want these winter videos. If you're begging for, some of the classic deer hair jigs and stuff like that, they're coming soon. It'll be here before we know it. But Junior's Fishing Company, like and subscribe, drop some comments below. See you on the next one.